Hey guys, Travis here from GameSpot at the TSM offices to interview Reginald from TSM about the recent Chris Badawi ruling that happened about a week ago. Reginald, we were talking a little bit before this. Do you want to kind of give me a background on how you met Chris Badawi?
Yeah, so I met Chris Badawi through Steve, and he was a friendly guy. I introduced him to my staff, Loco Doco, all my players, Dan, and since then he has offered Loco Doco a job, which Loco Doco told me directly, and then he also offered Dan a job and also to be a co-owner, and Dan also told me directly. I did approach Chris. I asked him if he could stop poaching my players, and he lied straight to my face, told me he didn't do that, and then afterwards he deliberately also went towards Bjergsen and also offered him a job as well. So those have been my experiences with Chris. And when I confronted him, he lied directly to my face, even after being warned by Riot and also the other owners that poaching isn't okay.
Now, so he attempted to approach Bjergsen or to poach Bjergsen, according to yourself. Did you have a conversation with Riot about this, or how did that go down?
So when he approached Loco Doco, I didn't worry about it too much, right? Primarily because initially when I first met Chris, he was very friendly, so I thought that he was just being overly friendly and just joking around at first. And even Loco told me that he was, kind of joking at first, and then, after a few weeks has gone by, he was more and more aggressive towards my staff. And it made the situation really awkward because I was the one that introduced Loco and Dan to Chris, because Steve introduced me to him and he was under Steve's mentorship. So I wanted to, welcome him in esports with a welcoming hand, and like really just show him around esports, make sure that he's operating correctly. So I introduced him to my staff and Loco so they can help him build a challenger team, just purely because we wanted to make sure that there are more good owners in LCS. And it was actually very unexpected from my point of view for him to actually go after the people working for me when I had them help him in the first place.
So then you were made aware of the fact that he was talking to Bjergsen and you felt he was poaching him. At this point in time, did you start to have a conversation with Riot?
Yeah, so I notified Riot that Chris was talking to Bjergsen, but I didn't really expect anything to come out of it, primarily because, a lot of owners poach, right? But they generally just get a slap in the hand, and I was surprised because I was surprised that Riot took such a hard stance on him, and then I found out that not only I was being poached, but TL was being poached, and it's just several other owners were being poached, and that he was warned by Riot that he shouldn't be doing those things.
Now, what do you think of the 1-year ruling that they made around him, or the ban? Because a lot of people in the community have felt like that's somewhat controversial.
In this case, I actually do agree with Riot because Riot generally makes a judgment based on how they feel, how big the incident was, right? And they felt like Chris not only deliberately poached and tampered, but he continually did it onwards and onwards and onwards. Like he was told by Steve that poaching isn't okay with Keith, and then he went on to Loco, and then after I asked him to stop talking to Loco, he went on to Bjergsen, and after that he went on to C9, Gravity, just several other owners that I can't confirm this interview, but just by hearing from other owners, he just continued to poach, and I think that's where Riot had to make a difficult decision to ban him. They want owners that they generally punish owners with small fines if it was like a first time offense or a second time offense where it was an accident. But if you're an owner that sees a rule and deliberately tries to break it and find loopholes around it and just continually find like different loopholes, then I think that becomes a huge problem.
So there's been chatter online about how you yourself might have been guilty of poaching in the past around Bjergsen or Santorin. How do you feel about these rumors?
So in Bjergsen's case, right, I actually contacted the general manager of, I think, NIP at the time. His name was Nicholas Fisher, and we worked out a very, very big, substantial buyout for a challenger player at that time that would have been multiple folds more than a general buyout at that time. So they were paid handsomely for Bjergsen at that point. And then in Santorin's case, it was the same issue. I contacted David Slan. We worked things out, and he was also paid a substantial amount of money for Santorin's contract at that point as well. And, keep in mind, I'm paying multiple folds more than what a challenger contract would cost at that day or at that point.
Many people might see this statement or this interview from you, interview from Steve R. Hanstead and other owners saying things and say that this is just a situation where owners in the LCS are afraid of this new guy coming in who's willing to pay substantially more. And in a lot of the conversation that both Chris Badawi and Monte Cristo and that kind of thing have brought out in these statements, it's kind of been this discussion around the idea that players are not being compensated fairly. In fact, in a Daily Dot article, Chris Badawi was quoted as saying, like, I think players get fucked, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. What do you think of this idea that, like, players aren't treated fairly, or that maybe this is all a reaction on your part, on Steve's part, on other owners' parts, to a new threat of a person trying to treat players fairly?
Okay, so for that point, right, I can understand why the community sees it that way, because there's been so many fucked up and messed up things that's happened in the community lately, like with the MYM situation, with the Copenhagen Wolf situation. I mean, it's shocking that the community wouldn't think otherwise, right? But as much as there are bad owners, I believe that there are also good owners. And even in TSM's case, we have always been at the forefront of treating players well. We're one of the first teams to provide health care for all players. I strongly believe that every single LCS owner and challenger owner should do that. Every single player that's joined our team, they are making several folds more than they should be, on any other team. And we've always been at the forefront of paying players more. It's public knowledge that we even compensate our CSGO team very well. So yes, there are cases that, players are getting screwed, but there are also cases of players being taken care of. And I think that making a general statement where all players are getting screwed is just false. To that statement, I don't believe that Chris is the savior of esports or he's even looking out for the players' best interest. He's contacting players and reaching out to players that would only advance his own agenda. And, every player that he's helping is in his best interest. When he's helping a player, it's not to help the community. It's not to help the bigger issue where players are being mistreated. It's to help players that are for his roster. And that's where I feel like it's he's being disingenuous.
What do you think of the idea that players or owners maybe aren't fair to players in the sense that whenever they get an offer, they might not relay that to the player, or that's something that should happen? And also to the fact that Monty in a statement sort of said that they were planning on instituting in their contracts a stipulation that would say, whenever we get word that a player is being approached, that something like, that will tell the player within a certain amount of time.
With that clause, I totally give it to them. I agree with that clause, and I agree with that point. I believe that every single player should be notified when they're given an offer for their contract, and that is something that I can promise the community, and that's something that I will accept. I accept that challenge. I believe that every single contract and every single LCS owner should also implement, that clause and add that with an addendum. I mean, from now on, I will add that clause to my contract and notify every single player of an offer to buy out their contract. So you guys can be rest assured that our players will be treated fairly.
Now, I always give everybody the opportunity in interviews to sort of say something to the community or wrap up the interview if they have anything that they'd like to add. Anything for you that you'd like to add at the end of this, Reginald?
So, ultimately, I would just like to stress the fact that, Chris not only, poached my players, but knowingly broke Riot's rules with malicious intent over and over again. And then not only is he doing that, but he's, manipulating the community to justify his actions. And a really big point is that he's only picking up players to further his agenda. There are a ton of players in esports that are getting screwed. And poaching one player at a time isn't going to fix that issue. What's going to fix that issue is forming a players' union, fixing it on a bigger scale, creating rules that will better players' salaries, creating rules that will force owners into providing healthcare, minimum salaries. Those are the type of things that will impact the industry as a whole. Do you see Chris going after European players and just going after several players or helping any players outside of his interest? Do you see Chris going out of his way to help players without his own interest? What I see is Chris is only helping players that are for his team. I mean, do you see Chris helping players that aren't for his team, Travis?
No, all the ones that he's tried to approach are for his team, my understanding.
Exactly. And I want the community to see that. Chris is not helping players for the players' best interest. He's helping players for his best interest to qualify into the LCS. He's helping the best players. He's helping Bjergsen, even though I treat Bjergsen very well. And he's only helping players and TSM staff that will advance his interest.
Well, thank you so much, Reginald, for the interview. It's always good to sit down with you. It's good to get your sort of take on the situation and hear your side of the story. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of our coverage of all things League of Legends at gamespot.com/LOL.